Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to episode 2 of my Deckard's Dream build. In the first episode I introduced you to the kit which turned up in this box, which is just a bunch of PCBs, and so with this episode 2 I'm going to share my journey into the purchasing, the acquisition of the components. Cool. Gee whiz, that was tricky. So what do you get? So you've got your PCBs and then you've got a list. You've got a BOM. You've got a bill of materials, a list of stuff that you need to get which you populate the PCBs with. Yeah, I've printed it out here just for fun. Tiny writing. Tiny writing, lists and lists of stuff. I've spent a long time with this BOM, trying to work it out, trying to understand it, trying to get to grips with it, because there's a lot of parts, right? There's a lot of parts. I totaled it up because it wasn't totaled up anywhere, and that total was 4,233. 4,233 components. What's a component? Well, anything from a resistor to a capacitor to a nut to a thing, to a plug, to a wire, the whole lot. Because all you get with your kit for your Deckard Dream is the PCBs, as I showed you in the last episode. And so every single absolute nut, bolt, piece of wire, fizzy thing, the screen, the sliders, the whole lot, you've got to buy yourself. And that seems like a massive undertaking. Huge. I mean, I don't even know where to start. Although I did start, and I've been fussing my way through this for the last few weeks, trying to get to the bottom of it, trying to grasp what it is I have to do. And in that searching and working out and reading and looking and surfing and trying to, clicking on stuff, I feel a lot closer to the project. I feel like I'm starting to grasp bits and pieces. I'm starting to understand, first of all, the enormity of the project, but secondly, what's actually involved in it and what the parts mean and how you split those up, and it gives me glimpses of my future, of a lot of soldering, awful lot of soldering. But I'm very happy to say that you're not just left there on your own. You're given help in order to achieve this, because there's a number of ways that you can approach the acquisition of these components. You can do it yourself, or you can just buy the whole bundle of stuff from another shop. Now that's probably the easiest way forward. But I thought, no, I'm not going to just do that. I'm not just going to buy the whole kit. I'm going to work my way through the BOM to see if I can acquire these bits and pieces more locally, because the place where you can buy the whole kit from is in the States. I thought, no, something a bit more local might be good. And also I thought, well, rather than buy a bundle, because they're bound to slap on the margin with that, aren't they? If I buy the parts a bit more individually, a bit more locally, a bit more putting in my own work, I'm obviously going to save a whole bunch of money. So that was my attitude. And that also seemed to be a worthwhile process to go through so that I could share it, because the bill of materials was in some places cryptic. It didn't seem to be always complete or always up to date, or why they did this and why they did that. And so I thought, if I went through this process, I can annotate and add notes and sort out the BOM so that other people following on from me could perhaps have a slightly easier time of it. Although, I mean, I assume that people actually coming forward to do this sort of project would probably have a lot more experience than me. I feel that I'm very much experience light as far as people who are building a Deckard's Dream go. I don't have all the knowledge and experience and everything else, and that came to the surface very much when trying to work this out. So before I waffle on too much, just to state what essentially the two ways of doing this. You can buy the synth kit from a place called synthcube.com. They do all sorts of electronics and synthesizers and kits and DIY stuff, and they have put together the entire kit of everything that's on the BOM, minus one or two bits, but pretty much the lot that's here, these pages of stuff, they've put it all together into one big box and they'll send it to you. And it will cost about $1,500. That is, without a doubt, the most straightforward, the most reassuring, the most secure way of putting this thing together. Because once you start going down the rabbit hole of trying to sort it all yourself, the certainty level of whether you've got stuff right tends to vary a bit. It bounces and then it just plummets when you go, I don't have any idea what I'm doing. But we'll come back to Synth Cube in a minute, because I'd like to just take you through the journey I had in trying to source these bits independently, because I think that's a worthwhile thing, a useful thing, and if you have a bit more experience than me, then that's probably a decent route to take. But, you know, give me a moment to lay out the reality of that for someone who's a bit of a numpty like myself. So when you get the bill of materials, you don't have to print it out, you can use it on the screen. It is split up into the PCBs, if you like. So you've got the hardware board, the main board, you've got the power board, then you've got the individual voice boards. And so as they do that, they've got all the components for each of those sections. And what you don't realize to start with is that a lot of those sections share components. So you're thinking, okay, right, so I need, how many? I need 100. I need 100 of these 0.1 microfarad capacitors, right? 100 of those, okay. Great, so you look around and you try, okay, put 100 of those into a basket. And then, oh, look, for this bit, I need another 98. Oh, I need another 98 for this. Okay, right. And then get through to the voice boards. And you go, oh, right, I need another 49 for each voice board. Okay, but for each voice board, so that's 8 of those. So that's 300 and something about it. So you end up needing 600 of these capacitors. And you start thinking, oh my God, I've got to solder 600 capacitors. I think these are the surface mount capacitors. I thought there was 1 or 2 capacitors per PCB that I had to do surface mount. No, apparently there's 600. So I think it's be quite safe to say that once I get to the end of this project, me and surface mount are going to be best buddies. We're going to be well into it because we would have known what we're done by then, I should think. Crikey. But it's just important to realise that the bill of materials spreads this stuff all over the place. So one of the first things I sat down and did was try to combine it all. Because ultimately, if I'm trying to buy from a shop, you get discounts on quantity. So I don't want to put in the main board and then order the other bit separately, or put the other bit in separately, because I'll end up paying more for each component, if you see what I mean. So you need to combine them down. So although it's useful to have them split up per synth voice, and this is what I'll come back to once all the stuff arrives so that I can put them all in separate boxes, you ultimately want to break it down into something more manageable. And that's what I did with these pages. So I split it all down into 3 pages, much larger. So there's actually less individual components. There's only something like, oh, I didn't number it, however many there are of this lot here. So that's a little bit less frightening than the masses of pages that's on the original BOM. So then how do you go about acquiring these components? Well, the best way forward is to use a website called Mouser. Now, Mouser is an American component website, but they have mirrored websites in every country, I think. So you can go into the .co.uk website and everything will be in UK pounds, which is groovy. I mean, it'll all be ex-tax, of course, so you'll get hit with all that when it gets imported. But that's where you can start. And it's better than that, because you go to a component website and you put in, I'll have 1 nanofarad capacitor, please. You get a choice of a gazillion, all sorts of different types, different brands, different this, that, and the other. And you go, I don't have any, how could I possibly have any idea as to which one to choose? But it's not like that, because in the BOM, they've also included the Mouser part number. Right. And not only that, because Mouser is the sort of place where you can upload a spreadsheet of what you want, and it will pull all of those out and just stick them straight into your basket. So you don't even have to go through individually to find those components, because all you have to do is upload a spreadsheet and it's done. Now, there's absolutely no way that I'm going to just trust that that all works correctly, because it doesn't sort of go through and go, oh, I'm not quite entirely sure whether we found this one or not, or this one or not, and is that quantity right, etc., etc. So even though it's easy to do that, it's absolutely worthwhile then going through component by component to check that it's there, because you don't want a situation where you've ordered a load of stuff from the States and you get one capacitor when you should have had 600 capacitors. It's just worth your time to go through. And also, again, it makes you see the components because you see a little picture of it. You start to get an impression of what this is about, and it slowly dawns on you the enormity of the entire project. And what on earth are you doing? What are you doing? So that's what I did. So I went through everything. So once Mouser had loaded up this project, I could then save the project as my Deckard Stream project, and I could go through one by one just to check, is this right? Is the quantity right? Do they have it in stock, which is the other factor. There's also other things, like some things have minimum quantity order numbers. So you have to get 18 of these in order to acquire the one that you want, or you have to get 100 of these to get the 2 of you want. So those things are also worth going through. Some of the Mouser codes refer to stuff that's actually now discontinued, and there's a new version to replace it. So you just have to go through it all, and it is time consuming and not particularly pleasurable. So then I went through, and every time I found something that wasn't in stock, I made a note of it so that I could see if I could source that somewhere else. And that was great. It was all moving great guns. And then I thought, right, well, so I can get all this stuff from Mouser. Surely I can do the same locally and potentially save a bit of money, can't I? Or at least, because I'm getting it locally, then I've got a bit more control over returns and issues and getting extra one or extra this, or, it must work, right? So I dug into Farnell, which is a company that provides components, and also RS, Radio Spares, and had a look into them as well, brought up their websites and went through every single Mouser code to see whether they had an alternative. Now, after I spent several hours doing this, what I realized was that that's more difficult than it sounds, because the Mouser code isn't necessarily recognized by Farnell or RS, because it's just their own stock code. I mean, it often refers to the manufacturer's code, and I had to dig a bit deeper on the Mouser website to find the manufacturer's code, which I can then use in RS or Farnell. But it doesn't necessarily follow that it's exactly the same product, and you end up being given a choice of, say, half a dozen or 10 or 12 of different products that approximate the product that you're asking for. And this starts to do my head in, because I just simply do not have the experience or the knowledge to know whether this electrolytic capacitor is the same as this electrolytic capacitor. Is it the same size? Does it matter? Is it just the value that I'm interested in, or is the physicality of it important? And as I say, my confidence levels just started to drop through the floor. So after a lot of hours put into seeing whether I can put the whole thing into Farnell, I just had to draw a line under it and decide that I don't actually know. There's too much inconsistency, too much I didn't really grasp and didn't know about it, and I just do not have the knowledge or the confidence to know that I'm buying the right thing. Also, checking pricing, Farnell and RS just seem to be a lot more expensive. I mean, even per resistor. From Mouser, it was often 2p a resistor, and in Farnell, it could be 20p a resistor. I mean, there was that sort of night and day type differencing in prices. And so all in all, I thought, sod it, I'm just going to have to stick with Mouser. I mean, someone has already done the work to get all the right components. I mean, obviously they are building the Deckard Dream as a complete unit, and so they know where to source the parts from. And although Black Corporation is in Japan, and so they're probably sourcing from China, I suspect, there are a lot of users in America who have been building this thing, and that's the parts list that they use from the supplier that they use. And so confidence starts to come back up again, and you think, yeah, okay, let's just stick with Mouser. Now, there were some things that they didn't have. There were some things that were out of stock, and so for those, I was able to find them on both Farnell and RS. And so I had a little checkout project of 100 quid or something, I think it was, with Farnell. Let me have a look. Yeah, 120 quid, and from RS about 30 quid. What was the RS thing that I couldn't find? Oh yeah, the TL064 quad operational amplifier. VCAs, I think they basically are. Couldn't find them anywhere other than RS, and they only had 50 in stock. And this is one of those things where you put in the manufacturer code, and you've got like 6 different choices, all of them with a slight variation. You think, well, I don't know, it's got a variation in its title. Does that mean it's a variation in its actual being or operation? Does it have a different leg? Is it surface mount? Is it going, this is one of these situations where you're just not entirely sure, because it's called a TL064IN, and you could get the TL064NE and the 4ND and the 4NT and the, so on and so forth. And it's like, this is melting my brain. But I need 74 of them, so I need to get it right. And RS seem to have 50, so all right, close enough. We'll go with that and assume they'll be able to get us some more. So after doing all of that, after sticking everything that Mouser had into Mouser, making sure all the quantities are right for 8 voice boards and such like and so on, and getting the out-of-stock stuff from Farnell, I came up with the following sort of pricing. So the total from Mouser was going to be just over £1,100, including tax, so including VAT. And that's making the assumption that when I import this project, when it comes through customs, I will be charged VAT, and there's probably a 50 quid customs fee or something of that nature. So that's around 1,100 quid. The Farnell stuff would be local, so that's all right, 120 quid, and RS would be 30 quid odd. So that's about another 150 quid, so that gives me about 12.50 for those parts. 12.50, all right. So comparing that to the Synth Cube of 14.99, which if you do the conversion into UK pounds and then add the VAT back and custom fees, you get to about the same figure. You get to about £14.99. So at the moment, 12.50 against the about 1,500 quid from the Synth Cube. You think, okay, fair enough. I'm winning. I'm getting ahead of the game. This is nice. However, this is not the full story, because on our BOM, back to our BOM, there's actually a fair chunk of stuff that doesn't have a Mouser code. There's a fair chunk of stuff that has a whole bunch of eBay links on it. And you're going, what? Where is this? Where is this stuff? Or some other external links. For instance, there's one particular pot that seems to be only accessible from one shop in America. And there's a knob as well, which presumably goes with it. And that's only available in this one shop in America. I cannot find anything which looks like the image of that component anywhere else. So I'm going to have to buy it from there. Here we go. Here's my miscellaneous parts bit. And on here, there's a whole list of stuff which is bought from eBay. Of course, but eBay is weird because eBay auctions or even buy nows, they come and they go. So some of these links didn't really link to anything that was currently available, and then would bump you to an alternative which actually wasn't necessarily the right thing. And of course, it's eBay in America. And yet it was eBay in America buying stuff from Hong Kong and China and then sending it to you, which got very complicated. However, once you started turning that into ebay.co.uk and then putting the same kind of description in, or borrowing the description from the .com one and sticking it into .co.uk, you then started finding these things which again were going to come from China. They'd take a month, and sort of left me rather scratching my head wondering, well, why on earth can't I get these things more locally? And actually starting to dig into it, starting to research it, I found that I could. I mean, Mouser had some of the parts that perhaps it didn't used to have, but now it has. And also so did RS, so did Farnell, and Amazon, for that matter, had a few bits and pieces that I was looking for. And so I was able to turn a lot of these bits and pieces around. I mean, there's some things that just didn't seem to be available, like the little spacers that go between the PCBs. They seem to be impossible to source from anywhere. But, working it out and routing my way through, I did finally find some kind of supplier. A lot of the eBay stuff, though, was in hundreds. So, for instance, you need a couple of header things that connect, like you put two boards together and there's pins that connect together on either side. You can only buy them in hundreds, and you need two. You need two of them. Or there's these momentary switches, and you need half a dozen of those, and you only buy those in hundreds. And so it occurred to me that perhaps there's other Deckard Dream builders sitting around that have got hundreds of these things in boxes that they can't use or have no use for. And so I did a bit of reaching out on the Deckard Dream Builders group on Facebook just to see if anybody had that sort of thing. And there wasn't a whole lot of comeback on that, I have to say. but it's not a massively active group. People aren't there every day discussing these sorts of things, but it has also been extremely useful, because I had a few questions over, is this the same as this? Is this component the same as this component? And people on there were absolutely able to give me the right sort of advice. There are things like you have to buy a chip from Thonk, which is great. Thonk, UK, local, great. But it didn't state whether they were through hole or surface mount. So I don't know. So I had no idea. So I had to ask in the Facebook group, and they said, oh yeah, that's through hole. Yeah, no problem. So great, okay, I know which ones to buy. But that sort of information would have been fairly vital, I think. But ultimately, going through all the weird miscellaneous stuff, I mean, this is things like the caps on the sliders, the programmer for the screen and the firmware. Well, the screen itself, for that matter. There were standoffs and USB adapters and the little MIDI plugs and all those extraneous bits that aren't necessarily mounted directly on a PCB. They're part of how the whole system connects together. And those were the hardest things to find because they're all over the place. But I did get there, including things like the slots that the cards go in. You've got to get those. Again, I seem to only be able to buy those in huge, ridiculous numbers. And you need 8 of them, 9 of them, 8 of them. Don't quite remember. But I did get there in the end. Some of them I was able to include into the Mouser build, some into the RS build and the Farnell one. Other ones I was able to price up either from eBay or from Amazon or from a direct company somewhere in the States. And I ended up finding that there was an extra £400 worth of bits and pieces. £400. I mean, this includes, of course, the oscillator chips, the 3340 oscillator chips, of which I need 16, and that ends up costing about 200 quid. So, you know, there's a lot. There's a lot in this. But if we bring this back to what I'm totaling up so far, this means that my self-build, which was in the region of £1,250, has now gone up to about £1,650. And that's a bit more than the Synth Cube purchase. So my journey ultimately is kind of saying to me, you don't really want to source this individually. You want to just buy the kit from Synth Cube. Because first of all, it's cheaper. I mean, that's a fundamental, isn't it? Secondly, and probably what's most important, is that it will come with all the right parts. All the right parts. It will have the lot. And they'll even be bagged up telling me what they are and what they're for and where they go. So the experience that Synth Cube have, the fact that they've put all these things together, I'm not going to get pots and pots of stuff I don't need. I'm not going to be ended up with boxes of 100 of these that I only use one of. They're just going to give me the stuff that I need. And it will be the right stuff. Even the stuff that's gone out of stock, they will source the right bit or the right alternative bit because they know what they're doing. Unlike me, I don't know what I'm doing. And so at the end of this journey of racking my brain over this and spending hours and pouring time and time into trying to work these things out, I can, I think, safely say that just go for option 1. Buy the kit from Synth Cube. Now, if you're a massive DIY enthusiast and you've got reels and reels of resistors and bits and pieces already, you've got a load of stuff and other bits and pieces that you can use, then yeah, go to Mouser and get your bits individually because you'll already know what you're doing. But me, for people like me, or if you're just going to give this a go and you're someone who doesn't have masses of DIY experience and you don't have packs and packs of stuff, then just go with the Synth Cube thing. Yeah, I mean, in some ways I'm a little bit sorry because I'd like to buy some of the stuff from Thonk, for instance, because I want to support my local DIY place. I think that's no bad thing. And actually talking to Synth Cube, that might well be possible because I am lucky enough to have a company called Infinite Machinery who are going to provide me with the 3340 oscillators, which is awesome. Thanks ever so much. But obviously if I'm buying the Synth Cube kit, then that's going to come with all those oscillators. So I sent a message over to Synth Cube to say, would it be all right to buy the kit and for you to leave out the oscillator chips? And they said, yeah, we can do that. No problem. I mean, as long as it doesn't get stupid, I think they'll be open to anything. So if you wanted to, leave a couple of bits out, then I think they'd be up for doing that, which is very, very useful to know. One thing none of it comes with is the case. The case, the front panel, that's a whole other thing. That seems to be available from one place in the States and costs about 270 quid, something like that, landed with VAT and bits and pieces. So that's an extra. So if we're rewinding and totaling this all up, then it's probably going to cost you about 1,500 quid to get the kit from Synth Cube. That's minus the case. The case I've got here, including shipping, comes to about £220. So you've got to add that in as well. So you're looking at something in the region of 1,700 quid for all of the components, all the stuff in one big box, more or less, with the case, ready to go. That's it. That's the reality of it. That's how cheap I could make it. I couldn't do it any other way. Now, there's other things you can do. You can go in with other people. You can share stuff and components, and so you don't have to deal with the whole, having stuff that's not being used. But you've got to factor in your time. You've got to factor in the energy in doing that. And I think ultimately the Synth Cube option seems to be the best solution. So there you go. So if you are in this position where you're about to embark on this thing and you would like a copy of my annotated BOM, the stuff that I did, the sourcing that I did, I put in links to everything I was trying to find, pricing and bits and pieces, then just drop me a line, give me a shout, and I will email it to you. No problem. It's just a spreadsheet. It won't make any sense, and I will absolutely not support any part of it myself, because this is just my way. Like the color coding here was just a color code, the same thing here, the same thing on another page, so that I could bring all those sorts of things together. So if that's helpful to you, you are welcome to it, but I can't really answer any questions on it particularly. You're just going to have to see how that goes, because it's an adventure, right? It's an adventure. So I'm sorry for the sort of the ramble through that. In my head, it was going to be a lot more ordered and scientific, but I don't know. We're just talking about components, and it's not particularly interesting. And I just wanted to share my experience of that. Now, where are we now? What other things have happened since then? Because I'm about to pull the trigger on the Synth Cube order, and then the next stage is going to be building the bloody thing. Woohoo! But before we do that, I've got a little plan, and that's this. This is a little plan. This is from Infinite Machinery, and it is a little DIY kit based upon the 3340 oscillator that they're going to send me. So the ones that they use, they're a UK distributor of the 3340 chips made in Latvia, the same ones that Erica Synth use, I believe. And so I thought it'd be a worthwhile project to build a single oscillator that has a single one of these in, because the Deckard Stream has 16 of those bad boys. So I thought I would warm up by building a single one. Doesn't look too difficult, got all the usual bits and pieces on it. I mean, look at that, what a pathetic bag of components. This is nothing. I could do this in my sleep. I don't know that I can. So I'm going to have a go at that in the next few days, I think, which I will share with you. Of course, here's the actual chip itself, is in this little bag. So there it is on there, along with the VCAs, I think, the quad VCA type chip, or which is something or other. I don't really know. Now, building that kit is also going to give me the opportunity to try out my new soldering iron, because despite the huge chip I have on my shoulder about using crap gear and how awesome that is, I felt that after discovering I had 4,000 components to solder, it seemed to make sense to me to take the advice that people were giving me. People were constantly saying, "Oh, why don't you get yourself a decent soldering iron, you idiot?" And so I thought, all right, let's do that. So when I build this little kit here, I'm going to compare this 20 quid, 12 quid, I think it was. Ugh. This 12 quid from Amazon soldering iron that I've been using up to now. It does have a variable temperature, which I'll come to in a second. So I'm going to compare that with this thing. Look at this. It's a Hakko. It's a Hakko FX888D. It's the BOM, apparently. It's the one everybody wanted me to get. Now, sadly, it doesn't have a dial on the front. The old one used to have a dial on the front. This has got a digital display, which is a shame. And it only has an up button. So I guess it can only get hotter. And that brings me to one of the, look, see, it's detachable. Look, it's detachable. That goes in the front there somehow, like a MIDI cable. Ooh. Well, they're very similar looking. So maybe I can give you a bit of a review or an overview or a comparison to using a crap soldering iron, a potentially crap one, and using a posh one. Is there any difference? Does it make it any easier? Probably will. I hope that it will. I mean, some of the comments have been along the lines of that it will maintain temperature better, which got me into a bit of an argument on a recent live stream. We're talking about why temperature matters. I mean, obviously it needs to be hot enough to melt the solder. Duh, yeah, of course. But every soldering iron is going to do that. So why would you need to vary the temperature? And I got lots of replies along the lines of, well, because components are heat sensitive and some things need to be hotter and some things need to be cooler. Yeah, but which? You don't get a packet of resistors and it says, oh, please do these ones at 350 degrees and do the other ones at 375 degrees. That just doesn't happen. So I don't have the knowledge or experience to know how hot a soldering iron should be. All I know is, does it melt solder? Oh, yes, it does. That should be hot enough then. So that's kind of where I am with that. And you're welcome to throw in more useful advice in the comments because it is actually useful. Although you have to forgive me if I'm a bit short on it sometimes because most of it's nonsensical. So telling me that stuff is heat, responds badly or goodly to heat, that is of no use as a piece of information unless we know what the answer is to that. What temperature then must it be? Not just that, oh, this is terrible if you overheat it. Okay, so what temperature should it be? See what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? So overall, I think you kind of set it to a melt point and then you just go with that. I mean, one experience I do have with using a cheap soldering iron is that sometimes stuff just stops melting and you kind of have to wait or try hard or try the solder further up the thing or, not on the leg, but actually on the iron itself. And that gets a bit annoying. And I'm led to believe that with a better soldering iron, that sort of thing won't happen because that heat won't disappear. Because what's happening is that the heat is disappearing up the copper wires and copper threads, whatever they're called, lines on the board. And so heat is drawn away, and that's why you're not getting the melt. So I'm going to be interested to see that kind of thing. I also have a couple of things. I have a very posh looking solder sucker. Whoa, look at that. That Thonk recommended. I thought, sod it, I'll get a new one of those because my one keeps exploding. When I go pop, it then just falls apart. So I'm going to use that. Got a pair of tweezers for the surface mount business. That's good. That's a sponge, I think. The sponge for this probably goes in there. I should spit on it or put some water on it or something. So that, I imagine, goes in there. And it also came with a little copper cleaner. Like so. And I imagine that probably sticks in the front so that it goes in it. See, that would be genius. What a great thing. Little holder. Look at that. Worth every penny in that case. So as you can see, I am getting there. I'm getting my stuff together, getting my shit together, getting focused, getting practiced, ready for the day that all the stuff appears and I can start hacking my way into this build. The other thing that was suggested was that I get hold of a little DIY project that has some surface mount in it, just so that I can get into the idea of doing that before I do it on the Deckards. That's a really good idea. So I think I might do that. I mean, funny enough, I've always fancied a little Penrose quantizer. I could always do with another quantizer because I only have the one. And as I'm expanding in sound sources, then having a second one is useful. And the little Penrose you can get from Thonk does have, I believe, a little bit of surface mount. So maybe that would be a good project to get. But I'll have a look into that. That's certainly worthwhile. But first of all, hopefully this week, next week, I'll have a go at this little fella to try out my soldering iron and get myself moving into the idea of what this build is going to be all about. So it's exciting times. So I hope that's helpful. And in the meantime, go make some tunes.